All right. So just to get some introductions out of the way, my name is John May. I am on the engagement and marketing team here at Webgility. If you've been to any of the Webgility webinars in the past, probably 2 years, if you've seen any of our YouTube videos, if you've called into our support line, you've heard my voice or seen my face. I've been with Webgility for, I think, 4 years as of a couple days ago. So I started an implementation. I'm pretty familiar with our product and e-commerce as a whole. I work with a lot of brilliant people in the e-commerce space. And I am joined by Christina, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Christina Simonson. I work at TaxCloud, as John shared. I actually more recently joined the team. I joined in January, so about 7 months into it. I've been really enjoying talking about sales tax, and in particular, I work very closely with a lot of our accounting and bookkeeping partners. So if anyone's on here and wants to connect, I'm always interested in chatting and hearing more about your firm. But yeah, really excited to dive in today and help you all start to get ahead of Q4. So it's going to be right around the corner.
Yeah, perfect. So just to kind of preface what we're going to be talking about today, I know obviously the webinar has been marketed as sort of a playbook for the end of the year, right? And that can mean a lot of different things. I mean, especially if you're in retail, there's a lot of different chaos that happens at the end of the year. So we'll talk about what that chaos means, what it looks like from an accounting perspective, from a sales tax perspective. And then I wanted to spend a good majority of the webinar talking about some of these real tactics that you can use to sort of get around the chaos, prepare for the chaos, and make sure that you're planning properly for either this year, which I know is coming up quick, or next year if the timing is a little too tight. So we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about the real things that you can do, the real change that you can affect, and then we'll end with sort of a note about how automation works to your benefit when it comes to tackling this chaos. Obviously, if you don't know who TaxCloud is or what WebGility is, that is our bread and butter. We are automation platforms, so we have a lot to say about how to save time in those areas. And then we'll end with the Q&A. So I know I want this webinar to be as cut and dry, straightforward as possible. Down to the the brass tacks, I guess, if you will. So we'll go ahead and start with what chaos looks like, and you'll see words like chaos and stress and scramble throughout this webinar. It's not to scare you. I know any merchant, anybody that sells or is in e-commerce probably knows what to expect at the end of the year. For the most part, I think most sellers know that you're looking for record sales, you're looking for that chaos. It's a good thing to run into, high order volumes and sort of a mess at the end of the year. It means you're doing well generally, right? So I think with that I guess that make or break time, that increase in sales, it's important to look at how you can set yourself up for success on the back end operationally. So when we're talking about chaos, I think the biggest things that you'll see as a seller on the operational or financial team are things like mismatched deposits and data entry errors, things that just aren't quite fitting right on your books. Limited reporting and visibility, so not being able to see what's profitable to you because maybe you have an inventory backlog or you haven't been pulling and posting your orders frequently enough to be able to see in the minute what's going on. And then sales tax complexity. So obviously, with an increase in sales, with that peak time, you might be meeting Nexus in new places and get some new exposure. And then just the very fact of waiting to the end of the year to get certain things done operationally means that you might put yourself behind, your team might fall behind, and that makes everybody stressed out, right? So I think all of these points are very obvious. I think anybody that's in the e-commerce world has experienced this at some point or knows that these are very common problems. So what we aim to do is talk through how to sort of, again, set yourself up for success here. And what's at stake? So all those problems that we talked about lead to, some very specific, I guess, exposure when it comes to how you handle your business and what it means to, be profitable. So I think that one of the biggest things is that you'll be blind going into the peak season if you don't have all the necessary data. If you don't have everything in line, if your orders aren't posted correctly and you don't have all your sales tax nexuses set up, you're not gonna have the full picture of what your cash flow looks like. So when it comes to preparing for inventory or preparing your ads for the end of the year, not knowing how much cash you actually have on hand to spend on these things and to invest is a big problem, right? And then I don't know if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the sales tax surprises,
Yeah.
Christina.
Yeah, like John just shared in the last one, I think a big part of the peak season is great, right? You're going to see a lot of more sales come through. But part of the considerations is, where do you have Nexus as a business today? And is this increase in sales going to bring you over the threshold in any new areas? And if you're starting to get close to that in certain states, how do you kind of get ahead, right? So that you don't start to create issues where, you pass that threshold and now you have missed filings and collections and all of that good stuff. So it's really about, getting ahead so that you don't have to deal with more costly audits or VDAs or things like that, or more reactive versus how do you get proactive. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but trying to avoid those surprises for sure.
Definitely, definitely, and I think lastly, and this kind of goes alongside the cash flow situation, that if you don't know what's performing well on your stores, if you don't have the data to tell you on a SKU level, a product level, what is selling or not selling, you could be leaving money on the table, right? Like if you are missing out on this opportunity on your Amazon where a product is selling exceptionally well compared to the same product on your Shopify, or you have some products that are lagging behind in terms of their profitability, you might not know that right away. You might have a pretty lagging indication of when those products need to be adjusted from an inventory perspective. So, yeah, we'll cover sort of ways to combat that going forward. But just like I guess a last forward to this whole I guess setup of what the chaos looks like. Um, the holiday season isn't just about sales, right? It's not about maximizing your profit. I know that's a big part of it, but it's about going into the next year feeling confident, feeling refreshed, and making sure that everything is set up correctly. If you set yourself up for the next year, then you know that you're going to be, walking into a stable situation with everything prepared, and ready to kind of, repeat the cycle for the next year. So, with all of these things in mind, I think the four main points here that you want to have accurate cash flow. You want to go into the next year knowing that you're audit ready. We like to use the term audit bulletproof accounting. It kind of speaks to the confidence, and then you want to be able to make better decisions, and you want to make those decisions faster, and then sort of to couple the audit ready tax confidence, that stress free closing. So getting yourself and your team to a cadence of closing where you feel confident and nimble when things do need to change, because a lot of people run their books and their closing, their reconciliation in a very static way, and we'll talk about how that can sort of lead to problems. Not necessarily all the time, there's no one rule for everybody, but yeah, some key points here. So let's talk tactics. I think I wanted to start this off with a quick conversation about some, like, really current events. I didn't include full slides on these because I think some of these things are sort of beat to death already in terms of not just the conversation around e-commerce, but just conversation in general. So we'll talk a little bit about tariffs and what that means for your business. I think super important to talk about, even if I don't have a slide dedicated to it. A little bit about AI and about inventory preparation. So when it comes to inventory preparation, I didn't want to include that in this webinar as like its own slide, mostly because I think everybody knows that at a certain point you need to prepare your inventory going into the holiday season, right? That's the number one thing you hear in any advice that anybody's going to give on a webinar like this, right? It's always, hey, if you haven't ordered your inventory by September 10th or a month ahead of the Amazon Prime Day sale, then you already missed out. You're already too late. Better luck next time. Better luck next year. So I think it is important to call out, yes, you should prepare your inventory for the end of the year, but I think that's sort of the order of operations is off here, right? I think everything else that we're going to talk about is more important in the short term to make sure that you're setting yourself up to understand how much inventory you need. If you are prepared, if you have your books ready, if you understand which products are selling well and which ones aren't, you know how much inventory to order and when. So I think just kind of boiling it down to like make sure you have your inventory ordered, make sure you're ordering more inventory going into the holiday season is a pretty obvious point to make. Still one that I do want to make because it is important, but not something that we need to dwell on. And sort of coupled with that is the conversation around tariffs. I know um, you can get really political really quickly with the tariff conversation, but that is not my point that I want to make here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about tariffs and how it's affecting going into the holiday season. Being that the tariffs have been sort of like, on again, off again, pushed back 90 days, kind of, things are up in the air. I think a couple questions that you might want to ask yourself as a seller are one, are my main sources of product are the suppliers that I use in places where the tariffs are going to be levied very soon. I'm sure you already know that as a seller. That's probably something you're very in tune with already. But if they are in those like high tariff areas, and you're kind of wondering what to do, I would say obviously look at suppliers in areas where the tariffs are lower. I think the most obvious answer would be to see if you can source it in the U.S. because that's obviously the goal of these tariffs at the end of the day. But if there's a middle ground, finding a country or an area where the tariffs are a little lower that you can meet your inventory needs, that is probably the first order of business. And then I guess the second half of that would be your pricing strategy. I think an obvious pricing strategy for combating tariffs, staying competitive in the marketplace, is to eat some of that tariff cost yourself and not pass all of the price on to the consumer. I know that means your margins are going to be lower, but look at it as a sort of a numbers game between finding the balance of uh, meeting your margins and expanding your market, kind of cornering the market in what ways you can, staying competitive. Again, very obvious stuff to talk about when it comes to tariffs. I know that this conversation has been sort of beat to death. The last thing I wanted to talk about was utilizing AI as much as possible. Again, another topic that gets talked about a lot. Um, I think it's important to know that there are tons of different LLMs available that all do different things. So look for LLMs or GPTs that focus specifically on deep research when you're looking to, understand your market or your persona, your ideal customer persona. And then for creative things, use something like ChatGPT. ChatGPT just 5 just came out and has a lot of insane creative capability that I've been utilizing. So just keep in mind that utilizing AI for your business is something that I think everybody should do, but be aware of where the strong suits of each piece of AI that you're using, and where they can fit into your business. Because you want it to work with you, not against you. You want it to give you accurate information, and you want it to kind of bolster your business rather than relying on it to do everything for you, I guess. All right. A little long-winded. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Christina, but
Yeah. No, I
yeah,
love it. I think, like you said, very common topics that are being spoken on a lot nowadays, but also at the same time, of course, we're coming at it in different topics of, sales tax and all of that good stuff. But I think in general, just kind of thinking about in particular, I know that probably everyone listening here has a lot on your plate, and Q4 is going to bring a lot of things, right? So I think the AI piece is just whether or not you're implementing it in your systems, it's just helping you get an assist in your day to day to hopefully take some of that chaos down, right? Or a little bit less on your plate that you have to do manually. So definitely a lot of power there. And yeah, lots to chat about all three topics, but of course, important to be thinking about in your business.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could talk about those things all day if we wanted to, but I think ultimately the goal of the rest of this webinar is to give you that real-time ammunition for the things that you can control specifically in your financial paper trail when it comes to sales tax and orders and inventory and stuff. So, to get right into it, let's talk about the Q1 jam. I think this is the easiest thing to talk about because it's, I think, the most tangible, right? Like, uh, putting off your operational tasks or getting behind on your reconciliation means that you're just going to have to pick that work up at the beginning of the year when it does slow down, right? Which isn't necessarily the end of the world. If it does slow down for you in Q1 and you have some time to go back and make sure things are fixed, it's not the worst situation to be in. But there is a world where you don't actually even have to go back and, cram all that catch up work back into Q1. So one thing to call out is that the risk of audits is always, I mean, it's always something that is prevalent. It's not just, at the end of the year or the beginning of the year. But knowing that, this sort of catch up happens at the beginning of the year, I think that leaves a lot of people open to that exposure, right? So auditors are always going to look for reconciliation gaps, missing tax entries, and like mismatched deposits. And those things tend to happen a lot more at the end of the year when things get crazy and data entry errors happen and things fall behind. So the first, I guess, tip that we'll give you, and it's a pretty straightforward one, is to just run a monthly checklist. It doesn't have to be monthly. It can be whenever you do reconcile. We'll get a little bit into, how often you could be reconciling and how to make it work in your favor. But run a quick checklist and go down the list. Is your bank reconciliation complete? Are your merchant accounts balanced? Are your sales tax entries posted correctly? And then are your refunds and COGS aligned? It's as simple as that. That'll help you understand where everything is at that current point in time. Obviously, the tasks that make up that checklist tend to be a little bit more complicated depending on your workflow, but this is a really simple way of understanding where your finances are at and going into, the busiest time of the year, kind of keeping a level head on what's going on. Another sort of quick tip is to keep your bank and merchant statements available. So understanding, um, having a system of all of your records at hand when you absolutely need them is super important. I think that everybody knows, right? It's like keeping your social security card or your birth certificate handy. Like you need to have them at some point, so have them in a place that you can remember where it's at and get to it pretty easily. And then just to kind of round it out, knowing that you're going into Q1 bulletproof, like I said, we like to use that word, it gives you the confidence to scale. And then if you are, even outside of audits, if you're looking to take on more debt to expand your business, because that's always the goal, is to scale, you're going to have lender meetings, and lenders are going to want to look at your books and understand how your paper trail has been working. And having that checklist and those documents ready and at hand makes it a lot easier, makes you feel a lot more confident, I'd say. So
Yeah. John, one other thing I would just call out too in the keeping your documents on hand is just exemption certificates as well from a sales tax perspective is always good to have, whether you're storing that in a platform or you have those on hand. That's something that would come up if you do end up having an audit come your way. So just to add that on.
yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. Awesome. And then this will kind of tie into a lot of the other topics that we'll talk about as well. But one thing that a lot of sellers don't, especially new sellers, don't really fully understand or see, especially in QBO, as I've called out here, is that you're only looking at the gross revenue. So the gross revenue of your products, not at the profitability of each of your products individually. So if you don't have your cost of goods sold, your COGS data available in your system of record, like QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop or whatever, accounting system you use, you're not going to see the true profitability or the true expense behind each of your products. So if you have the ability, import all of your cost of goods sold data into your system of records. So understanding how much it costs to acquire it at a glance, how much it costs to ship it, how much it costs to, all of the various expenses behind selling the product on top of, the revenue you get from the product gives you a true uh, idea of how profitable that product is. And if you don't have that for every single one of your products, you're probably missing out on some valuable tweaking that you could do to increase your margins or increase your overall revenue. If you have products that aren't selling well compared to some of your better sellers, and you're not scaling those down while scaling your more profitable products up, you're again leaving money on the table. Um, so yeah, it tells you sort of what to scale for your catalog and then what to sunset if something's not selling well. Or if it could be selling really well, but it could have a margin that is so low that it's not worth it to continue selling. So just something to keep in mind. Perfect. And I know I sort of talked a little bit about when you should reconcile. And after making this slide, I realized that it looks pretty sequential. This is not a sequence that I want you to follow. This is just 4 points that I wanted to make, two of them related to each other. So Uh, when it comes to closing, a question that I get a lot, especially on our customer webinars that we do, is how often should I be closing? Should I reconcile at the end of the month every month? Should I reconcile when my Amazon settlement reports come in? Uh, a lot of questions. And the real true answer is that there is no, one way of doing it with anything in accounting. I think there are ways that you can, follow the general consensus, which is the generally accepted accounting practices GAAP. But for the most part, there's a lot of ways to get things done in accounting and a lot of different workflows that people have. And it really all depends on how your business works outside of accounting as well. So a couple things that I will say are that you might not want to stay the same with how you close every single month. Sometimes it's going to be better for you to close monthly. Sometimes it's going to be better for you to close weekly. And then if, time allows it and your workflow allows it and your catalog allows it, closing daily might not be the worst thing to do either. So yeah, when it comes to daily closing, it can help you stay caught up during the day-to-day peak holiday rush. So if you have a workflow that allows you to do daily reconciliation to match those numbers up as close to real time as you can, that can help you stay ahead, not only from an accounting perspective, but understanding how that season's going for you, right? Like if you can have that day-to-day information fed to you, you can understand and pivot a lot quicker if something's not working out correctly for you, or if something goes viral for you and you need to scale quickly. On the flip side, monthly reconciliation is a general practice. I think most people kind of default to that. Is really good for when things slow down, or if you have a high volume workflow. If process 100,000 orders a month or something like that, it might not be realistic for you to reconcile daily. The paper trail would be very confusing. A lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. So there's times where monthly reconciliation is probably still going to be your best bet. And then in types of transactional posting, I think it's important to call out the difference between summary and that individual transaction. So summary posting, when you just take a batch of orders with kind of scaled down data on them, so you're not getting maybe the inventory data or any of the specific SKU level data on the orders. That can save you time because it's cutting down on that data. It's cutting down on all the extra, uh, things that you might need otherwise, but it's just posting the order totals, which just keeps your balances in check, basically. Again, on the flip side, you could go for transactional posting, which gives you that higher fidelity visibility into every fee, every SKU, every piece of the order and everything that goes into the order, and gives you that data that might help you understand better what's going on. The transactional posting in QBO, not as much of a problem, but I will say in QuickBooks Desktop, if you're a QuickBooks Desktop user and you have a lot of orders, at some point, transactional posting may slow down your company record or your company file. That's, I mean, a problem that most QuickBooks Desktop users have run into or, sort of plan to run into at some point. QuickBooks Online, not as much of an issue, but yeah, just be aware if you have a lot of things going on in your QuickBooks Desktop company file, transactional posting may mean that you have to restart your company file at some point if it gets to the point where it slows you down. But yeah, this is just to kind of point out that there's a lot of ways to do it, and sometimes doing it the same way every single time or throughout the year might not be in your best interest. It could be good to stay nimble and sort of switch your workflows around when it suits you for that season or for when it slows down. Cool. And something that we always talk about here at Webgility, especially to our newer customers, people that are going through our implementation sessions, is clearing accounts. Generally, they're called clearing or holding accounts, people call them as well. Um, to kind of explain what we use them for, payment gateways, settlements, payouts, like merchant fees, stuff like that, generally come through on their own time. So if you have an Amazon account and you get your settlement report from Amazon, it doesn't work on a calendar. It doesn't stick to, your reconciliation schedule. It's going to work on their time, right? It is every 2 weeks or every 15 days, but it's on Amazon's time from whenever you started your account and you had your first settlement report. So what that does is it creates those timing mismatches for when you might have already like planned to reconcile on, a calendar date that fits your normal workflow. but you're not getting your settlement report until a couple days after or a week after. So what we suggest is creating a clearing account or a holding account, which is essentially a dummy account that exists in your chart of accounts where you can sort of segment or partition those specific transactions apart from everything else so that when the deposit does land or when that settlement report does come through, you can easily clear it with the main bank account. And we don't just recommend clearing accounts specifically for payment gateways or settlements or payouts. We recommend creating it for every single sales channel that you have. That can kind of make things more confusing if you don't fully have a grasp on what's going on already. But generally, a best practice that Webgility recommends is setting up a clearing account for every single one of your sales channels that you have. And anywhere that you want to segment the transactions or the money from, it helps you keep things separate and understand, compartmentalize exactly what's going on with your orders, your transactions, your fees, everything. A good example of this would be you get your Stripe payout. You record $2,000 in sales to your Stripe clearing account. So you put that straight into the Stripe clearing account. And then Stripe deposits that $1,900, 1940, which is it deducts the fees. And you'll have those fees in their own clearing account. And you can zero it out correctly and have it, again, partitioned, compartmentalized away from everything else. All right, and sort of hand in hand with the clearing account situation, another thing we get is why don't my deposits match? Why aren't my numbers matching when I go to reconcile at the end of the month? And a lot of times it's just because the Shopify deposits, the Amazon deposits that you're getting, the settlement reports that you're getting, don't equal just the gross sales, right? It's going to include the deduction of fees, the refunds, chargebacks, taxes. Fees is probably the biggest ones because they, especially on Amazon, there's, an entire novel of fees that you have just for using Amazon. So, a good equation to always remember is the net deposit is always going to equal sales minus fees minus refunds minus taxes. Super easy, especially in Amazon. If you're selling somewhere outside of Amazon and you're having to remit your taxes somewhere else, this equation could get a little, different. But for the most part, just think of it this way: your net deposit is going to equal not just the sales, but everything minus that. So kind of going hand in hand with the clearing account slide that we had last was setting up clearing accounts for each of these things to keep things segmented. So you have your main clearing account for your Shopify or Amazon or eBay, and then you have a clearing account for any refunds that you have, clearing accounts for the fees. You don't have to do one for every type of fee, but a clearing account for the fees specific to that store, and then a clearing account for your tax liability as well. From there, that makes finding the net deposit a lot easier. It keeps things a lot more straightforward for you when it comes to making sure that those numbers match up at the end of the day, or a month, or a week. Speaking of refunds, they don't have to break your books. This is a more of a quick tip than anything. A lot of sellers forget that refunds impact both the sales and the cost of goods sold. A lot of times when you get a refund, you're just deducting it from the sales because that's the obvious thing, right? Like it's not money that you have anymore. It is a refund. So one thing that people do forget is that it should also be deducted from the COGS. You should deduct it from your cost of goods sold because it technically didn't get sold. So if you're not doing that, your profit margins are going to look lower than they actually are, right? So just remember to deduct refunds, have a process in place to remove refunds from your cost of goods sold when they do happen. All right, and related to the fees, merchant fees are digging into your profits. So when you get those fees from Amazon, a lot of people just lump them into like a miscellaneous category in their QuickBooks, which can work. I mean, if you don't have a whole lot going on in miscellaneous, it might be a perfectly fine place to place them. But if you're just lumping it in with other things, you're not getting a full picture on the profitability of your products and the revenue coming from that channel specifically, right? So if you're selling on Amazon and you're just kind of throwing Amazon fees into a general bucket along with other things, you might not be seeing that your Amazon's costing you way more money than it should be, and that maybe selling on another marketplace or another sales channel is more profitable for you. So just to keep in mind, if you can lump those fees into their own category, like Amazon fees or Shopify payout fees, stuff like that, It will give you more insight into exactly how much of your profits those fees are eating into, and then you can evaluate if you want to stick with that sales channel, that marketplace, if you want to invest more in ad spend on it, or beef up your catalog to offset those fee costs. All right, and I'm gonna take a drink of water, and Christina can take over for this one.
Yeah, thanks, John. Lots of great tips. I think hopefully everyone listening at this point knows a lot of what we're sharing is to, in general, help you be proactive and use the time now to, again, avoid the headaches and the stress at the end of the year. So, a couple of tips to share when it comes to your sales tax compliance. First thing, let me talk about Nexus. So, I talked about this at the beginning. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but if you're newer to sales tax, what Nexus means is it's essentially where you have liability as a business. So, it's kind of two key parts of that. Where your business is physically located, and then it's also going to be based off of your economic nexus as well. So if you're already handling your sales tax today, you likely already know which states you have nexus in, but it's really important to be, in real time tracking your nexus thresholds as those are changing. So let's say, for example, I'm in Massachusetts, you're a business that's located outside of Massachusetts, and today you're at, 85% of that threshold in Mass. You might expect that in Q4, you're going to see a really big surge in orders that's going to bring you over the threshold in Mass. And you might want to actually take the time now to, either prepare or actually register ahead of time so that you're ready to go once you hit that threshold. And you can, again, goal here, avoid missed sales tax. So it's always important to have a clear view of where your nexus is and how that progresses throughout the year. Another thing to be aware of is all of your different sales channels. So John talked about this, right? Nowadays, we know you're selling on lots of different places. That could be channels that you own, right? So maybe like your own website or invoices you're creating in QuickBooks, but it's also marketplace facilitators, right? So as a business, you want to make sure that you're able to look at all of your channels holistically to understand your sales tax exposure as a business, not just based off of those channels, right? So this is really all about seeing your full picture of Nexus and then also reporting accurately as well. Just saw a question. I was going to take a quick peek at it about economic nexus. Typically, that's going to be based off of a rolling year period in terms of the economic nexus. So, good question.
Yeah,
And
usually it's like
it does vary by states too. So, happy to follow up with some more details on that as well. And then a couple other things just to note. Of course, as you get into the holiday selling period, other factors come up, right? You might be discounting your products or doing special offers, or like John mentioned, maybe you need to think about how tariffs are impacting your pricing. The nice thing with sales tax is actually my tip here is that it's pretty simple. Sales tax, when in doubt, is going to be based off of what your product price is, right? So, say for example, you sell something that's $100, you decide to discount that down to 75 during the holiday sales, your taxable amount is going to be that $75. So, want to just make sure you're considering those things correctly so you're not, over calculating or under reporting or anything like that as well. So, a couple of tips to help you get ahead. If you jump to the other slide, another thing just to kind of be on top of, right? So, the last slide I talked about your calculation and nexus tracking as a business, but of course, filing and remitting is a key part of sales tax. So it depends on your business. So I know this can be very nuanced at times. So a couple of just key deadlines to look ahead of. So depending on if you're monthly, quarterly, or annual in particular states, always good to get into a routine of maybe putting reminders on your calendar or staying up to date to get those filings in on time. And other tips to do, so I mentioned set reminders. Again, you want to assess like what your cadence needs to be. Typically, that's going to be based off of your sales volume in that state, and that's going to tell you how frequent you have to file. And then we always recommend, utilizing some sort of automation, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But as you scale beyond multiple states, it starts to get really difficult to manage that manually, stay on track of deadlines, right? So there's a lot of value in using a tool that's going to help automate that work for you, so you can work on other stuff in your business. So a couple of things to think about that I wanted to share from our side.
yeah, love that. I think it's good to have sort of a jumping off point for when you should file and what the deadlines are. I think that's something that a lot of people get really confused on. Because most people, especially when they get into e-commerce or just owning a business in general, they don't sign up for all the things that come with, sales tax and
Yeah.
taxes in general. I think most people, it's just like,
Yeah,
so.
very complex topic. I get it. And so at TaxCloud, we really like to do what we can to just simplify it down, right? So always try to help keep it digestible, but I know it can get quite nuanced as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, and I think a big thing to call out here is using the data for next year. So, uh, especially when you talk about like, did you prepare your inventory for the end of the year? If you haven't done it by September, you're already way behind. There is that FOMO, right, that comes with the end of the year. And if you haven't set yourself up or don't have all these tools or know where to access the data, it can feel like you're already behind. But one thing to kind of level yourself, level set for the beginning of the year going into next year is to look at what data you do have available, either from last year or this year, and sort of use that data to make decisions. So ask yourself which of your SKUs had the best profit margins. So look into each of your products and understand which ones performed well, which ones didn't, and kind of come up with a strategy for your product catalog that allows you to scale the things that are selling well, and again sunset the things that aren't, or at least just scale them back. Another question would be which regions created the biggest tax liability, right? Like, are you selling in some areas that are giving you a heavier tax burden? Just understanding what to expect when it comes to the areas that you're selling more in, where you're meeting Nexus at. Which channels of yours drove profitable growth? So, like, similarly to understanding your SKU profit margins, understanding from a macro perspective, which of your sales channels is performing well, which of the shipping partners that you're using is, saving you the most money or costing you the most money, which of your marketplaces is charging you more in fees, because that allows you to really kind of one, budget for next year and understand sort of what the expense is going to look like as you scale, and two, reorganize if you need to. If you need to switch shipping partners, if you need to switch the marketplace that you're selling on, or scale back or scale up depending on how well one is doing. But most importantly, I think if you miss the window for 2025, if you feel like you've already missed the boat, you're already playing catch up, take this time to, look through everything that we're talking about here and prepare for next year already. Because it never hurts to be prepared. You can never be too early, right? So, uh, use this time to kind of look forward to next year so that you don't find yourself in the same position where you're like, why am I way behind? I don't understand what's going on with my products. I don't have the inventory that I need. Again, use the advice that's kind of listed here to help you kind of guide you into the next year. All right, and that sort of leads me to sort of the last point here, and I think this is, in my opinion, and it's a biased opinion, and maybe Christina can agree here. Automation is a gift. I think it is probably the most important thing that can save you time going into the holiday season or any season for that matter, for a couple of reasons. And I wanted to start off with probably the most human reason of all, in that the end of the year is it burns people out, not just your employees, but I'm sure you feel burnout by the end of the year, not just from work, but from family functions, from having to socialize. Like, the end of the year is known for the last, 4 weeks just being so packed full of everything. You have so many things to do, errands to run, deadlines to meet, people to talk to, parties to go to, right? It drains everybody. So, taking as much of that cognitive burden away from your employees, from yourself, from the finance team, the operations team, I think is probably the best gift that you can give anybody, right? So when I talk about automation, I'm talking about not just from a Webgility or a TaxCloud perspective, but talking about anything that you can, any tools that you can utilize, anything that you can add to your workflow to reduce the work that you're doing manually, right? And I think doing as much of this as possible, your team is going to thank you. You're going to thank yourself. So I think, to speak a little more from experience, we'll get into what Webgility does in this arena. And I know there's probably some Webgility customers on the call. There's probably some TaxCloud customers on the call. I don't want this to feel like we're just sales pitching you. This is, I think, just as applicable to Webgility customers as it is to people that have never heard of Webgility or used Webgility. I think it's important to look at what automation can do. We'll use Webgility as a frame of reference because that's where I have all the information on. But apply this to everything else that you do in your business, right? So, Webgility offers, online order syncs, refund syncs, payouts, fees. It can pull all that data that we talked about directly from all of your sales channels at once and put it into your QuickBooks without you having to go and manually, create sales receipts for each transaction, understand the fees that come from each of your payouts. It can do all that for you if it's set up correctly. So not just one sales channel, but it can connect to all of your sales channel, pull that inventory, pull that pricing, make sure everything from your cost of goods sold perspective is all in one place. So it gives you that centralized view of all of your data, all of your orders, all of your transactions. Um, if you're in the B2B sector or do a little bit of B2B, we do automate purchase orders as well. So really anything that comes your way in the e-commerce world, Webgility can sort of automate that, push it into QuickBooks for you, whether that's online or desktop, and give you that top-down view of your business without you having to go and click a lot of buttons manually, risk that manual data entry, and again, most of all, spend it's like 10 to 20 hours a week on average for the bookkeeping teams to do what Webgility can do automatically. So again, your accounting team will thank you. I think again to relate this outside of Webgility to go away from Webgility, just like again, I don't want to sales pitch you. There's a million other softwares that do exactly what we do or do other things like this for your business, whether it be like if you have a CRM and you want to automate your emails or your marketing outreach or your ad spend and understand what your target markets are. You can automate your order listing updates, your customer service. You can have a chat bot. So there's a million things that you could be doing to automate your business. And I think if you aren't already doing most of those things, you're either leaving money on the table or you're spending unnecessary time that you could spend either with your family or getting ready for the next year scaling your business. And I think this is a good bridge between the conversation about Webgility and the conversation about TaxCloud, because this sort of includes TaxCloud in this infographic. So the way that this life cycle would work from an order automation perspective is the customer places the order either on your Shopify, your Amazon, your eBay, wherever you sell, and then it syncs the order data directly into QuickBooks with all that detail. So customer info, items, amounts, cost of goods sold if we have that. And then it calculates the expense. So all those expenses, the payouts, the settlements also come in and post alongside those orders. And then everything is organized directly inside of your QuickBooks. So again, the result here is you get time back in your day to grow your business, or if you're a part of the finance team or the bookkeeping team, it saves you time, allows you to focus on, the tasks that require a lot more of that cognitive burden, not those menial, sort of manual tasks that you'd have to do. And then helps you worry a lot less about sales tax compliance and compliance in general. I see one question before we get to TaxCloud side. Is there a limit as to how many products Webgility can sync? As far as I know, the limit doesn't exist. Depending on which of our softwares you have, if you're using the the QuickBooks Online version that's made for QuickBooks Online, it tends to be a lot more lightweight. Whereas QuickBooks Desktop, a lot of the limitations you'll run into on QuickBooks Desktop are sort of around what QuickBooks can hold. QuickBooks company files, especially on desktop, have a tendency to slow down the more information that you have. So I've seen people with like 50,000 SKUs that the QuickBooks company file runs pretty sluggishly. It'll still work with Webgility, but there's going to be sort of a timeline. It extends the more orders you have, the more products you have. So I'd say there's no limit to how many products we can sync, but it's really dependent on what your computer can handle, what your connection can handle, and what QuickBooks can handle is the big caveat there. Um, will you speak to how to speed up the reconciliation process? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to talk about in the reconciliation process, and I would love to do a whole webinar on reconciliation. And actually, we sort of just did an introduction to like Amazon settlement reconciliation for a customer webinar last week. But let's take this question and answer it in the Q&A just to make sure that Christina can get through the rest of these slides, and then we'll circle back to that question. Perfect. All right,
Cool.
you've got the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. So similar to John, what I don't want this to sound like is a full pitch for TaxCloud, but I do want you to have the details in case you saw some of those tips, you're looking for guidance with your sales tax and how we can actually help you as a business. So one other thing to call out is that today I'm sharing a bit more about our QuickBooks Online integration, but we have a bunch of other integrations. You can always check those out at taxcloud.com/integrations. But what you'll see with TaxCloud is we really try to have very user-friendly, simple workflows. So one thing to call out with our QuickBooks Online integration is that it's actually built in a browser extension. So you can see an example here in the top right. Very easy to use once you get trained up on it. You could build out an invoice, and then all it takes is really kind of clicking that blue button. Your invoice refreshes, and you're going to be able to calculate your sales tax all within your invoice directly. So what does that actually mean, right? What I'm talking about there is that real-time calculation for your sales taxes. We support three document types: invoices, sales receipts, and estimates in QuickBooks Online. And yeah, so a couple of things to call out when you do work with us in a platform like TaxCloud is you're going to get that real-time calculation, right? All within your invoices or your transactions. But you're also going to get the power of that automation. So I saw a question in there about what does that automation mean from a sales tax perspective? So what that means is that by integrating into your system, we're going to take all of your transactions and bring them into our system and help you, number one, track your nexus, right? So I talked about that a bit. We're going to show you your transactions across states and give you visibility into places that you already have liability or where you're starting to reach new exposure. But then we can also take that and automatically file for you, right? So manually filing can take a lot of time of having to pull your data, prepare their filing reports in your own, but using an automation tool can kind of take that burden completely off of your plate. Then the other kind of couple quick things I want to make sure that folks know is that I mentioned, or actually don't know if I mentioned the SST program yet. That is the Streamlined Sales Tax Program. And the long story short on that is that it's a really great program that helps to simplify sales tax in up to 24 states. And the power of using something like TaxCloud, which is a certified service provider, in that program is that we can actually do those services for you free in those states as long as you're a remote seller. So what does that actually mean? For example, if you're a nationwide seller and you're just have economic nexus in those 24 states, you're getting TaxCloud services and filing for free, which gives you a really great savings as a business. So if you work with us, you'll get one-on-one onboarding that's going to help you set up the extension, get set up and confident with how it works. But just to kind of give you a little bit of context on how it works. And if you jump to the next slide, John, I think this is a good quote that we hear a lot from our customers. I know probably a lot of folks on here again. We understand there's a lot on your plate and you've got a lot to manage in your business. So at TaxCloud, we really like to think of ourselves as being this right size solution, as Kevin shares here, where we're not going to be overly complex with features you don't need. We want to give you exactly what you need at a price that's going to be affordable and really great support. So we'll share more resources, but would love to chat if you're interested in learning more. And that's, I think, the quick update on my side.
Perfect. Yeah, and I didn't include a a testimonial slide on our end, but I do like to throw around the quote that we get a lot from an effectiveness of Webgility perspective. 10 hours a week is the metric that we like to use from customers. It'll save 10 hours a week in accounting manual work at the very least. So, yeah, I think both of these conversations we just had really speak to how, again, not just Webgility or TaxCloud can, save you that time, give you a little bit more peace of mind, but sort of branching out and we use the term omni-channel as sort of a buzzword in the industry, but ultimately, I think utilizing as many tools as you can to do the work for you is really the message that I want to drive home there. So, uh, I wanted to include a slide here for anybody that wants to, connect with the TaxCloud team, get a demo, or speak with the team about setting up a plan there. There's also a link directly to the Webgility website. You can start a trial if you're on QuickBooks Online, or get a demo of either of our products as well on the homepage. And then some additional resources. So we partner with Seth David of Nerd Enterprises. He's a consultant for QuickBooks Online users. He runs a a pretty awesome community of accountants and bookkeepers on QuickBooks Online in e-commerce, and he just did a video on the new QuickBooks Online layout. So for those of you that are still grappling with what has changed in QuickBooks Online, because I know, big changes, especially in accounting workflows, can lead to a lot of confusion. There's a good link to check that out and check out the new the layout there. Also, I mean, stick around in Seth's community. He has a lot of really, really good tribal knowledge and understanding of how e-commerce works with accounting. So it'd be a really good resource for those of you that are maybe looking to get a little bit more of a grasp on how to handle e-commerce accounting. TaxCloud's hosting another webinar focused on QBO on September 18th. So there's a link to sign up there. Do you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. The one thing I'll call out is we're actually bringing on a bookkeeping expert who runs a podcast as well called Get Comfy with Numbers. So she's got a ton of expertise. So excited to, it'll be a bit more general about staying organized in QuickBooks and all that good stuff. So we'd love to see you all there if you're interested in joining.
Perfect. And then I included a lightweight sort of checklist for sort of kind of to go along with what we talked about today. It's just a short checklist that you can ask yourself, are all of these things set up? If they are, then I'm ready for reconciliation in Q4. So it's just a good, way to remind yourself of what we talked about today. Really lightweight. It's just a Google Doc. It's nothing crazy. But I felt like that was a good sort of thing to pair with this presentation, with what we talked about today. As Christina said, you can email her directly in the. She put her email in the chat. I'll put mine in the chat as well because I'm always happy to chat with customers, non-customers, anybody that's interested in Webgility, anybody that wants to understand a little bit more about what's going on in e-commerce and accounting specifically. Um, if you have questions about anything that we talked about today, any of the, the tips that we made, because I know we didn't go into super crazy detail on every single one. Unfortunately, we only have an hour, so we can't spend too much time on them. But if you have specific questions, want to know more, you can email me directly. And it sounds like Christina is just as open to emails as I am.
Yeah.
So that's perfect. And now we can get to the Q&A. I know I told Tracy had a question in chat. Will you speak on how to speed up the reconciliation process? I think that's best reserved for this time because it can be sort of a conversation. So when it comes to reconciliation and speeding up the process, uh, I hear it a lot at Webgility that people sort of want something to reconcile for them, right? Like they want as brainless of a reconcile as they can possibly have, which is that would be an amazing reality, right? If we could, just click buttons and make sure that we didn't have to worry about numbers matching inside of QuickBooks. I think that's everybody's dream. But ultimately, the one point that I always drive home is that reconciliation is always going to be a human. It needs a human touch at the end of the day. You can get to the point where everything is put into place and made easier for you, which I think Webgility helps quite a bit with. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have to go in and make sure that things are balanced correctly. I think that's the best way to do it, and to make sure you don't run into issues in the future, because technology is never perfect. But what I will say about speeding up the reconciliation process is sort of all the things that we talked about today. I would relate it to get as much of the information that you can from all of your sources of revenue or expense or income and expense, and make sure all of that data is put into the same place. It doesn't always start from the same place, obviously, because you have your Amazon and your Shopify and your shipping processors and your payment gateways, and you pay your warehouse, and there's so many different things to keep track of. So they're all going to start and originate from different places, but you need to make sure that they're filtering into QuickBooks or whatever your system of record is. Because if they don't all exist in that place, you're going to have to be taking things manually, and that's when those mismatches occur a lot more frequently. So make sure that all of your data is centralized is the biggest point that I would make, and utilize that automation as much as you can. Tracy, I think you are a Webgility customer. So if you need any advice, or if you'd like somebody from our implementation or support team to go through and help you with your workflow to make sure that we're sort of enabling your reconciliation process as much as possible, just let me know. We can get a session scheduled. There's no charge for that. It's free of charge. We can always do these sort of refresher sessions to make sure that you're getting the most out of Webgility. And if it's something that even extends beyond Webgility, we're not CPAs, so we can't give you like tax advice or accounting advice directly, but we can always get you in touch with Our partners we're working with Hector Garcia currently, who is a really well-known accountant in the e-commerce space. And then, like I said, Seth David is a really good resource for us as well. But we are more than happy to help get things set up properly. Is there a link to the Amazon reconciliation webinar? Yes, and actually, I'll make sure I send that to you, Tracy. And on top of that, we're doing sort of a follow-up webinar to that conversation on Amazon reconciliation. Not next week, not the week after, but the following week, which would be, uh, sorry,
I'm looking at my
the
calendar too.
17th of September.
Yeah.
I'm really good. I'm really bad with dates. So the 17th of September, we're going to go through and talk more specifically about how to set up an Amazon account with Webgility to make sure that you're kind of set up for success. There's never one way to set anything up, as I mentioned before, but we do have some general practices and things that could help. So that's perfect. Upcoming Verendra says, are there any upcoming features or improvements in TaxCloud that businesses should look forward to? Yeah, do you have anything new that you want to talk about? I know you mentioned that program on the previous slide.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I mentioned the different document types. Some of those are new. So our support for invoices has been around for a while, but sales receipts and estimates are a bit newer. But I'd say in general, a couple of things that I'm excited are coming is we are doing a revamp of our kind of reporting page in app, which is going to be really neat and I think really help actually on the reconciliation point. So if you're ever having questions around certain transactions that are being reported on, there is kind of like a whole new revamp of that coming very soon, which is exciting. And then I talked a little bit about marketplaces earlier on. We're continuing to advance additional integrations there as well. So I think those are a couple of things I'd call out to look out for. But I'd love to hear from you too. So if you are a customer, whoever asked the question, or interested in learning more, email me. I'd be happy to chat because I'd love to hear if there's anything in particular you want us to build because we're always open to that feedback as well.
Love that. And that same goes for, not to piggyback too much off of your comment, but same goes for Webgility. If anybody has, an integration that they're interested in or some sort of feature that would make your life easier, we're always open to hearing what you guys would like because ultimately you are the reason we're in business, right? So those improvements don't come from nowhere. It looks like Cherie asked, are sales before Nexus threshold met considered taxable or only sales from that point forward?
From that point forward. So say you hit Nexus, on this date. Now moving forward, once you've passed that threshold, you need to start calculating, right? So actually collecting that sales tax at checkout and then remitting and filing from there. So the Nexus threshold is really about that. Like, okay, now you have exposure or liability and you need to start remitting to those states.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you look at it from like just like the logical standpoint of if you weren't meeting Nexus somewhere, you probably weren't, organizing your tax liability, your sales tax liability for that state already. So you wouldn't have the records to be able to, pay sales tax on it, right? So
Right.
look at it from that perspective. Once you meet that, whatever 100K for that in sales in that state, then you start to collect from that point on. Which is why it's important to understand when you're getting close to meeting that threshold, because then you're not playing catch up trying to make sure that you're collecting records on stuff that's already happened.
Yep, totally.
Cool. Any other questions? We are at time, but I'm always happy to go over a little bit if people have extra questions. I book extra time after these to make sure that I can answer any questions that people have. As we mentioned, if you have additional questions, if it comes to you right after we get off the webinar, because that happens a lot to me, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, get you in touch with the right people. There are a couple extra slides here. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about the demo that you have linked here.
Yeah, I just dropped it in there. When John shares over the slides, you'll see this if you are interested in seeing how I know the extension is kind of a more unique way to handle sales tax within the invoice. So I wanted to share some more context of how it actually works. So for those interested, feel free to check that out. But as John has shared too, also feel free to just directly book time with our team. We're very coaching heavy, so we want you to have space to ask questions and get walkthroughs with someone on the call as well. So, but that's linked all here in the deck as well.
Perfect. Yeah. So like I mentioned, this webinar is recorded. So just give me some time to edit it down, get it re-uploaded, make sure everything's set up correctly, and then we'll send it out in an email. I'll also include a link to the slides because I know we have a couple things linked here. So you'll be able to click directly on any of those links and access that information directly. And then I always try to add some stuff at the end in that follow-up email just to make sure we're giving you guys as much value as possible because we appreciate you coming to these. We don't have another webinar plan just yet here at Webgility. I know TaxCloud and Webgility have done a couple webinars together, so there might be another one in the future. But stay tuned and check your email for any additional webinars that are coming. If you are a Webgility customer or become a Webgility customer, we do have customer webinars that we do every other week where we cover specific issues that we run into from an implementation or support standpoint, where we can, kind of go into the minutia, understand how Webgility works, how to set it up properly, and then we do these Q&A sessions at the end of those as well. So if you have questions about anything regarding Webgility or e-commerce, that's a good place to come. So yeah, appreciate everybody coming to the webinar today. I will send those emails out tomorrow, most likely. Give me a full day generally. But if there's no other questions, we can end it here and get everybody time back in their day.
Awesome. I don't know if I said it, but also John, thanks for having us. It's always fun to do these, and thanks everyone for listening along.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Christina. And everybody have a wonderful long weekend for those of you that are in the US.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.
Take care.